Evan had always been a calm man. At least, that's what everyone around him thought. A history professor in his late 30s, his life seemed peaceful on the surface. He lived in a quaint, ivy-covered house just outside the city, surrounded by thick woods that sheltered him from the world. It was a place where history and nature blended seamlessly, and he often found solace in its quiet corners. But Evan carried a secret, one even he struggled to understand. Behind his composed exterior, something simmered, an anger that had always been there, lurking like a beast in the shadows. It was a rage he could never quite explain. It emerged in fits and bursts, at times consuming him entirely. He'd lose his temper over trivial things, a misplaced book, a missed appointment, or an offhand remark from a stranger. It was as if his anger had a life of its own, one he could not control. The house, with its creaking floors and whispering walls, seemed to hold on to the anger as well. There was a particular room at the end of the hall on the second floor, his father's old study, left untouched for years, that gave Evan an unsettling feeling. He had never dared enter it, and in truth, avoided the hallway entirely whenever possible. The room had always felt suffocating, like it was harboring secrets. One evening, after an exhausting day at the university, Evan's temper flared when he couldn't find an important document for a lecture. Papers scattered across his desk, his breathing quickened, and then he heard it, the sound of a low whisper coming from the old study. He froze, feeling a chill seep into his bones. The voice was faint but unmistakable, a murmuring that echoed through the walls. It seemed to be calling him by name. Evan! Shaken, he walked down the hall and stopped at the door. His hand trembled as he grasped the cold doorknob. When he finally pushed it open, the study greeted him with a stale, musty air. The room was just as it had been left years ago, old books lining the shelves, a dusty desk cluttered with yellowed papers, and a large portrait of his father staring down at him with an inscrutable gaze. Evan stepped inside, feeling a strange heaviness as he crossed the threshold. He was immediately drawn to the desk, where a peculiar-looking journal lay. Its cover was cracked leather, and when he opened it, he found entries written in his father's handwriting. The first few pages seemed ordinary, notes on lectures, observations on historical events. But as Evan continued reading, the entries became darker. His father wrote of the curse of the bloodline, of an uncontrollable anger that had plagued their family for generations. The writing became frantic, with descriptions of shadowy figures and whispers in the walls, feeding the rage within him. His father's final entry ended abruptly. "The room knows. It waits for the next." Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted, and the door slammed shut behind him. The whispering returned, now louder, insistent, wrapping around him like invisible hands. His father's portrait seemed to glare at him, the eyes full of accusation. The anger he had suppressed for so long erupted within him, like a volcano that had finally reached its breaking point. He screamed, knocking the books from the shelves, tearing at the old papers, as the whispers seemed to laugh and mock him. It was as though the house was feeding on his fury, growing stronger with every outburst. But then, as quickly as it had begun, the rage ebbed away, leaving him drained and trembling. The whispers faded, and the silence that followed was even more unnerving. The portrait now looked different, calm, almost relieved. Evan collapsed to the floor, breathing heavily, as a realization dawned on him. The house was not haunted by any ghost. It was haunted by the anger itself, passed down from generation to generation. In that moment, he knew that the beast was not outside, but within him, and it had been waiting for him to let it in. The whispering walls did not create the rage, they merely amplified it, drawing out the darkness that already lay dormant in his soul. Evan left the house that night, never to return. He moved far away, determined to escape his family's curse, but the whispers followed him still. They were not bound by the walls of that house. They lived in the depths of his mind, a reminder that no matter how far he ran, the anger was always there.